To ja. Pewnie się zastanawiacie, jak tu trafiłem.
Hi-Fi Rush to najnowsza produkcja Tango Gameworks, twórców takich tytułów jak Evil Within 2 czy niedawno wydanego Ghostwire Tokyo. Gry tego studia do tej pory kręciły się wokół horroru, dlatego wydanie kolorowego Hi-Fi Rush wywołało spore zamieszanie wśród graczy. O tym, jak wyglądała praca nad tym tytułem, postanowiłem zapytać samego reżysera gry i jego pomysłodawcę, Johna Johanasa.
Co to ma być do diabła ciężkiego?
Let me start by saying hi, John. It's a real pleasure to meet you. I'm a huge fan of Tango Works and especially an even bigger fan of Hi-Fi Rush, so it's a pleasure.
It's a pleasure to meet you, Jim.
Thank you. And I wanted to start with, I think, the most common question, which is, what was the main inspiration for the game?
It's more of like a personal project. I've always loved music. I played music growing up, and I love going to live shows. And I always wanted to sort of capture the feeling of either playing music or the kind of like the kinetic feeling if you've ever been to like a standing show where you're just like jumping with the crowd and things like that. The idea came to be this kind of, what if we made this sort of action game. I'm a big fan of action games, and we thought maybe I thought maybe I can make this where every single like hit will like land on the beat, so it just like feels good and feels satisfying. Finally, after we finished making the Evil Within 2, we just made a couple horror games. We were going to go into Ghostwire Tokyo, and I kind of wrote this pitch for a very un-Bethesda-like game at the time, for this sort of very colorful and goofy almost action game where everything goes to the music, this rhythm action game. Luckily, I must have pitched it with that sort of enthusiasm that I had, because that's what I was told later by my boss. But so they saw that they weren't quite sure how it would play out, but they clearly saw that I had maybe an image of how I thought it would play out, so they saw a potential. So they kind of internally were like, let's give it a try.
Okay, so that's it for the inspirations, I guess, because I could see a lot of Elite Beat Agents. I don't know, I'm not sure if you have played it, or Jet Set Radio.
That's like the concept inspiration, but from like a gameplay element, of course, we kind of went back to, traditional action games that are very technical, character action games like Devil May Cry or Bayonetta and things like that. But then also looking at legitimate rhythm games, like something you mentioned, Elite Beat Agents, or in Japan it's Osatakai Oendan.
Yes.
Like the more sort of hybrid ones, if you think of something like Rez or Lumines, that, again, not quite a rhythm game, but are like rhythm-oriented experiences. And then the visual-wise, that sort of generation of the Dreamcast and the PlayStation 2 and the Xbox, where everything was very colorful and poppy and just about fun.
Rozwalimy cały koncern. Szef po szefie.
I guess now we're in this sort of state where games are more pushing to be more of like an art form, very serious, very grounded, or very realistic. We almost wanted something that just made you kind of feel what it was like to be almost like a kid again, or to go back to when games were almost a little bit more simpler and just fun. And I think that was the core of this whole project.
And I must say, it worked really great, because that's how I felt. But
good, yeah.
The rhythmic games, I guess they are pretty difficult to make. I mean, tuning game visuals and animation to music must have been very hard. So what was your idea behind it? How did the work on that went?
The first idea that I had, and I kind of wrote this idea for the system where we would interpolate all animation so that no matter when the button was pressed or the player would do something, it would land on the beat, which was the idea. It just kind of steamrolled from there, and then we added elements of like, well, what happens when you do press it on the beat? Let's add some bonuses. And then it just kind of went, I want to say out of control, but it was all according to plan, that like everything in the world will also move to the beat. So we need to think about that, like whatever you put in the level, think about a stage, what can be on the wall, what could be moving to the rhythm of the song, what's the tempo of the song, how could we match that, what can we do in each stage that's unique to the song, and then even down to the cutscenes and the transitions and the sound effects, everything has to be in meter and matching and smooth connections, because you don't want that jarring feeling of something's in beat, it stops, then we pick up again. I like to think we made it look easy, but it was incredibly challenging task, especially for a team who has little to no experience combining all these elements together. I mean, we've had people who worked with animation, action games, or sound designers who worked with rhythm games, but none of them have done something like this. So it was us almost like relearning how to make a video game from the start.
Speaking of the team, what was the reaction of the team to this idea? I mean, the idea of this rhythmic game, and what was the atmosphere during the whole production cycle? Especially, like you said, this game stands out from the whole Tango portfolio, so...
When they saw it, they were like, this is never going to work. You're an idiot. This is terrible. This is never going to work. And I'm like, let's try it. Let's try it. But then when we finally started to get it coming together, everyone kind of saw the potential. Because I was like very, very hands-on and critical. I was like, I know you think this, but I swear, just trust me on this. Just move it a little bit to the left. The animation needs to, you're going to feel it. And I need the sound effect to be there. And once we got that final mix and everyone saw it together, then they're like, now I get it.
Do you remember anything in particular that you had to scratch off or leave behind because of the timing or the technical obstacles?
We found interesting ways around technical aspects, like actually the 2D animation stuff. The situations were so complex that we didn't know how we were going to make them, so we said, why don't we animate them in 2D? So that's like an example of how we overcome that. But the game is actually almost meta in the way of how we deal with cut content. We're actually very open, and if you played it, you may have actually seen we almost like directly or very clearly state like we skipped this scene. There was one character that was supposed to be a boss fight that you don't fight, and you can talk to a character later, and they're like, wow, that boss was so intricately designed, and it really looked like you were supposed to fight that. It's like, I feel bad for the designer who put all the effort into making that robot. Surprisingly, yeah, we're the cut content stuff, I think, is we played around with that. Like, we wanted to have fun, so we wanted to not try to, hide it up or be clever about it. We just wanted to basically almost like come out and say like, yeah, we couldn't fit this in. It was supposed to be there, but whatever.
My other question about this is actually about Shinji Mikami. How much input did he had in the development process? Because as we know, he used to work on totally different games.
Mikami-san has a ton of experience in not just the survival horror genre. He's made a bunch of fantastic action games. But early on, when we sort of pitched this, I think he was very supportive in the fact that he didn't want to try to take the idea and make it into a vision that he had. He saw that we had a very clear vision for what we wanted, and he gave us a chance to prototype the idea, and we did that, and then he saw the potential in that idea, and then it just kind of snowballed from there, where he was always there kind of checking the builds or checking in to make sure things are going well, but he very rarely would kind of step in and being like, no, I don't like this, so you have to change this. Like, he is very supportive and almost like mentoring in that sense of supporting the team and doing what we wanted to do.
Do you have anything that you particularly regret that you couldn't implement into the game? Just one thing.
I think it turned out great regardless, but I think towards the end of the game, there's the second to last level, there's a very special sequence where the team kind of comes together to do things together. We wanted a little bit more playability in maybe some of the other characters' involvements in that scene. But that was just a little bit too tricky to pull off in our schedule, and but we did sneak a little bit of it in with one character. I don't want to spoil that scene for anyone who hasn't seen it because it's a really great part of the game.
I still haven't finished the game yet. I'm planning on doing it today, so thank you for that.
Okay, I don't want to spoil. Yeah.
So my last question is, do you have another great game in mind? Like, do you have another vision that you would like to pitch for? I'm not asking for any details, it's just a general question.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure if you asked any creator, they have a ton of their dream games they'd like to make. Luckily enough, I was able to make one at this point. But there's plenty of ideas that I have as well. So after Evil Within 2, it felt like the good moment to pitch that. I just kind of felt right. You gotta wait for the right moment for the next one.
Okay, fingers crossed for the next game.
Yeah. Then. Yeah, I'm sorry, that's like the most vague answer I can possibly give. But
that's fine. I thought that it would be like this, so I expected that. So, but thank you anyway. Thank you, John, for having us here, and thank you for this
interview.
Yes, thank you so much.
Zawód Gwiazda Roka?
Przyszła Gwiazda Roka.